welcome everyone to the Office Add-ins community call for July 8th. Today we're going to be sharing a new developer experience tool, the WebView switcher, and we're going to be going over some improvements we've been making to the Office Scripts API. And at the end of the call, Michelle is going to present a survey that will help us with our developer documentation and learning experiences around Office add-ins. However, first, we received a lot of questions through our Q&A form about the new Chromium-based Edge WebView 2. So we thought we'd invite Sudhi back from last month's call to kind of go over that information real quickly to help out everyone answer those questions about when is it coming out and how they can help support the tool and test in preview. So we'll be doing that first, and then we'll be going through our new WebView switching tool and then the simplified model at the ending of the survey. We also have time for questions at the end of this presentation or this community call. We'll be answering them, but please type your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll be trying to answer them as we go along. And yeah, so if we do that, also keep in mind, please mute your microphones unless you are presenting. We are recording this call, so try to keep the audio clean for everyone. All right, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sudhi to talk about the Edge WebView 2 runtime. So Sudhi, you there?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'm here. Okay, so just a quick recap. I talked about this last month. So we've got the new Chromium-based Edge WebView control available with Office add-ins in Insider's Fast. So just here are some very quick highlights about WebView 2. It's based on the open source Chromium project. It is going to be consistently supported across all the Windows versions. It's going to be available for both Win32 and UWP. Of course, the things that we're talking about over here is the Win32 Office app, if you will. And most importantly, this control is going to be always up to date. So that's sort of the default setting that all users who get this control and the browser are going to experience, is that this is always up to date, similar to how you'd update, for example, Chrome or other browsers out there that are available. So just a quick call to action again, based on just similar to what we did last month. So you've got that version of Office, starting with that version of Office that you see on your screen. Office is going to be using that new WebView 2 control as the default runtime for add-ins in Insider's Fast. You will need to be part of the Insider's Fast channel to get this build and this integration. You also need to install the dev or the canary channel of the browser. So that's super, super important. Make sure that you get that dev or canary channel. Otherwise, you will not get the WebView control. But most importantly, test and validate your add-in, again, using WebView 2. Let us know if you have any feedback or questions or encounter any sort of issues. Do let us know. One easy and quick way to know that you're running WebView 2 is if you're running the add-in, again, using WebView 2, you should be able to right-click in the task pane or within your add-in, and then you should see an option right there to debug, and that should open up the new Edge WebView 2 debugging tool. So super easy to debug as well. Definitely do test that scenario as well, the debugging scenario, using that new debugger tool. But again, as I said, let us know if you have any feedback at all. GitHub is a great place to post your questions. I'm happy to hang out over here for a few minutes as well if you folks have any questions. I know last community call there was a question around when this would get to production. Again, right now we're in Insider's Fast. We're looking to get this to production later in the fall, but more importantly, before we get there, I want to make sure that the control is tested. All of your add-ins and scenarios are working as expected. Only then we'll sort of get to production.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sudhi. And yeah, just to echo that, a lot of our products and our features rely on usage data before we can roll them out to general availability. So please, yeah, test this out. Give us your feedback. We're listening, and we want to make sure your add-ins work with the new WebView controller. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And Sudhi will be hanging out in the chat, so please type any remaining questions you have there as we proceed. But for now, let's go to the new WebView switching tool. So Artur, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you so much.
I'm a software engineer, specifically within Office Platform Experience, and more specifically within the developer experience team. You guys remember Courtney from last month? We actually work on the same team. So finally, there's an easy way to switch web views for Office add-in testing, which is fantastic. We're going to jump into a demo, but these are just some simple instructions to follow along with later on. But let me go ahead and share my screen. We can just start off with a pretty simple CLI, and we can build up an add-in pretty quickly. Yo, Office. I have a clicky keyword, so I apologize for that ahead of time. And then let's call it demo. And then we cd into here, and then npm start. And that's the sort of typical side loading steps for an add-in. And when we open it up, I'm running, I have the Edge Chromium installed. So when I right click here, you can see there's the Chromium drop-down menu here. When we close out of here and then run Office add-in dev settings, WebView, manifest XML, and Edge, we're able to set the WebView to Edge. So when we open this up, if I try right-clicking again, there's no drop-down menu that opens up. But if I go into here, Edge DevTools, I'm able to attach to this add-in. And then if we close out of here again, and then come back in here, and I run the same instruction, but instead of Edge, I use IE, then we're able to come in here, and this is running within IE. If I right-click here, there's the Internet Explorer drop-down menu. So we're able to switch pretty fluidly between these different web views, and it's a nice handy tool for testing. And then we can check the current web view setting that we have here by just running the same instruction without Edge, IE, or any other setting. And so it just tells us what we currently have, and if we want to set it back to whatever default we have, we just use default. And that's it.
Awesome, thank you, Artur. So we had the slide that had the steps for it. Is there documentation for this tool yet, or is that forthcoming?
There actually is documentation. It's bundled together with an Office add-in scripts. So if you go into the Office add-in scripts repo within packages, and then specifically within Office add-in dev settings, there should be, it's included within that README. I can go ahead and post a link to it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Artur. Anything else, or?
That's it.
Sweet. All right. Thank you. And yeah, if anyone has any questions for Artur, yeah, hop in the chat, and we'll post a link to all the documentation so you can try this out today and get more testing on different runtimes. All right, and then we'll hand it over to Sudhi. So Sudhi is going to talk about the new Office Scripts API model, the Sync API. So Sudhi, are you there?
Okay, yes. Hi, Alex. Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Sudhi. I'm a program manager in the Office platform team. So today I'm very excited to talk about some new developments in Office scripts for Excel on the web. So in today's session, I'll be covering a very high-level recap of Office scripts, which is a topic that has been covered in this forum before, and mainly walk through the improvements we have done for Office scripts API in much greater detail. I'll show and run some Office scripts code and talk about Office scripts API in relation to Office.js. So I'm sure that might be some question that's on your mind. And at the end, I'll leave you with some links for further learning. In this slide, we kind of just recapping what Office scripts is. So Office scripts, as you might know, is a new feature within Excel for web. You can now automate tasks and workflows easily and eliminate the need for repetitive steps as you create and manage Excel workbooks on your day-to-day basis. It gives greater control for administrators to determine what's safe or what's not, and yet allow organizations to share and collaborate very easily. So in terms of the features, you can record actions that converts your interactions and changes in the workbook to TypeScript-based syntax as a script. You can then edit that script or add your customizations or just simply run the script. You can also create a brand new script from the scratch if that's what you intend to do, and then add your own code on top. So as described in the last month demo, the script you record or create can be also connected to other collaborative applications such as Teams or email services or SharePoint using the Power Automation flow. So that's really like a cool new feature that allows you to interact with other services within your organization. And finally, you can use wide array of programming features offered by the Office Scripts API. Now, we've always strived to get the users to learn and use the programming features offered by the APIs to manage their day-to-day tasks and automate. One of the keys to achieve this goal, as we think, is to make it easy to learn and grow user skills. Though the previous version, which allowed users to use Office.js and Office Scripts, that offered a whole range of capabilities, it was a bit difficult to get started with. So you needed to understand some of the advanced topics, such as how asynchronous programming works, even for basic editing capabilities. So even simple scenarios may include things like reading values or performing whether a value exists or not, or iterate over collections of things like tables or charts, check if an object exists, or do some error handling. So such scenarios shouldn't be hard to achieve and shouldn't require advanced knowledge for those who are closest to the business processes and workbooks and those who wish to automate manual tasks. So we felt we can do better and make Office Scripts API easier to understand and use for those who are moving up from just recording actions to actually editing and making changes. So we wanted to make that journey of discovering and beginning your automation journey and be able to feel comfortable with the process much more smoother than what it was. So our goal was really to lower the barrier for entry and get the programming interface to match the natural flow of how users think and interact with the Excel workbook. So in that regard, based on our research and development, we are now introducing a simplified API version for Office Scripts. So it is now easier to get started and automate your tasks in Office Scripts by using a simplified API surface. And we'll go over the details of what that means. And you still get the same benefits of the previous model in terms of recording actions and using the full breadth of the APIs, and yet use a much simpler and modified model designed to suit both the beginners as well as for experienced users. So as with Office Scripts, it is now available as the primary API surface, and it is available in public preview. So the main thing is the Office Scripts APIs are now synchronous in nature, which means you can invoke them in a synchronous manner without having to worry about promises or callbacks. The API offers simple constructs. For instance, it has synchronous API getter and setters for things like property access, getting and setting properties. You can also invoke methods in a synchronous fashion. If you're familiar with the object collections in the Office.js, so it comes with somewhat of a fairly complex structure, but here in this model, we've simplified it. So object collections are just regular arrays. And now we can do better error handling because it's much easier to check if an object exists or not, and so on. We also added few APIs that offers improved interaction capabilities with common Excel objects that you might use, such as Excel range, table row, and column, mainly to match the dimensionality. So if you're interacting with a cell, now we can read and set its values and formats and number formats just as if it's a single value. And the same thing with columns and rows. And all this you'll get with the benefit of having the static type check offered by TypeScript. So we're kind of heavily leaning on TypeScript with this model And with that comes sort of better validation. And we've also worked on optimizing performance for select scenarios. And then in the future, we'll continue to do so to match the expectation that you interact with. And if you're familiar with Office.js, you can carry forward your knowledge, which means the object model hierarchy matches very closely with Office.js. So in terms of the naming conventions and object model matches very closely. And I'll talk about this towards the end of the presentation a little bit more. And just to clarify, before I show what the code looks like, so this simplified API model is only available in Office scripts, and it is not part of the add-in surface. So with that, I'll showcase the actual the scripts. So let's look at how the actual API surface looks like. So I'm going to switch over to Excel on the web. And you might be familiar with the place where you find Office scripts. That is on the Automate tab. It comes with the record actions as well as the code editor, using which you can now browse through your existing scripts. So the simplest way to start is to just start recording. So that way you have a base to start with. So here let me just set the value to test, and I'll stop recording, and I'll be able to save the scripts, edit it, and either run it as is or I can improve on top of it. So here, as you can see, the API surface has the main function that is called when you actually run, and it gets the workbook object. So workbook object is the top level object, and it has other sets of relations and hierarchy using which you can access the rest of the object model. And what the script is doing here is simply getting the active worksheet and then setting the value of a range, B3 is the address, and just setting its value to test. So as you can see, the APIs are synchronous in manner, so that means you don't really need to handle promises or callbacks. You can simply start to read and write with the objects that you're interested in. So let me do something. So here I'm actually setting the value. The interesting scenarios are when you can actually read. So let's see if I can get to the cell. Instead of setting it directly, let me just get the actual cell to a variable called cell, and I'm going to just set its value. Now, what if I want to get to the next cell and set its value or check its value? So I can do that simply by calling the APIs that is associated with the cell. So let's get the offset range. I'm going to keep the same row, maybe go to the next column. And now I can simply read values off of the next cell and then just use it directly. So for instance, if I want to check, hey, does the next cell actually have any value in it? So I can use that directly in my if statement. And then I can say, okay, yes, it does have a value, and I can print that value. So let's see. And if not, maybe I want to set its value. So I can do set value. So as you can see, the functions are available directly. The methods are directly available, and the function is getters and setters if you're dealing with the properties. So I can set its value to, say, I'll call it next value. So I'm going to just run this. It's going to set it to next value. So the next time it runs, obviously, it'll find the value, and it should display the information in the output area. So the console gets displayed, and the next value gets displayed in the console. So here, what I demonstrated is just the ease with which you can get and set values without really having to worry about any asynchronous nature of the APIs. Next, I want to showcase another script next, I want to showcase how you can check if an object exists or not and take actions based on that. So I'll start a new script. So if you start a new script, you get a blank script, and using which you can begin to just write your code. So let's say I want to add a worksheet called index if it doesn't exist. So the way to do that would be, so I'm going to just get the worksheet directly off of workbook. So I'll say get worksheet, and this takes in the parameter, and I'm interested in a worksheet by the name of index. So at the end of this, I should have this object, and I can check if this object exists or not. So in doing that is as simple as saying, hey, does this object exist? And if so, I can say, let's say console log, yes, the worksheet exists. And else I can just go ahead and create it. So I can do workbook. And as I mentioned, we also have methods that performs actions like reading, such as writing, doing some updates on the document. So I'll add a worksheet by the name of index. And then I can get new sheet. So once so this returns the actual sheet. Now I can take that object and perform other methods on it. So maybe I want to set its position to 0, so it shows up at the top of the worksheet. And then I'll also I will activate it. All right, so if I run the script, obviously the first time it's going to say yes, like it exists because I do have this. So let me go ahead and remove this. And I can run this again, and it'll create that index sheet, and it'll activate and move it to position 1. So with this, things like object validation and whether object exists or not, or even doing error validation becomes a lot smoother. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is my favorite feature, which is the ability to interact with collections with a lot of ease. So collections are things like anything that can have, exist more than once, like worksheets. They can have tables and charts and rows and columns within a table or a range. In the earlier model, managing collections was a little bit hard because you needed to understand some of the intricacies of how the collection is organized, and loading properties or acting on it required a little bit of advanced skills. So what we made is we made the Excel object collections a plain simple arrays. So what I'm going to do is start a new script again. And in this script, I want to achieve a couple of things. So I want to first go through each of the worksheets and collect its names. And maybe I want to reorder the worksheets in the ascending order of the sheet names. So in order to do so, I first want to get the worksheet collections. So let's say I begin with let's sheets, and then workbook, get worksheets. So what this returns, as I can see in the TypeScript IntelliSense, is just a collection of plain worksheets. So this is just a plain array of worksheet objects. And because this is an array, I can do I can call the array functions or array methods, such as I can map over it, I can do a for each on it, or I can just read its length. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's say console log. I want to just read, hey, how many worksheets are here? So I can do worksheets length. So I want to collect next the names of each of the sheets. So doing so is pretty simple. So let's say names. I'm going to iterate over sheets. So I'm going to use map function. And then for each of the sheet, I'm just going to return its name. Right. So so at the end of this, I should have, I'm going to display the names and the length. Let me make sure it works correctly. Oh, I'm already displaying the length. Right. So let me run this. So it should display, hey, it has 4 worksheets, and here are the names of the worksheet. Let's see if I can go ahead and reorder the worksheets in a way that suits me. So let's shuffle this up a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is take the names of the worksheets that I have. And because this is just an array, I'm going to sort this. And I'm going to do a for each on it. I'm going to get the name and its index. And then what I'm going to do is get the workbook. Of that name, and because it's in the order, so I can set the position to be the I. So I'll set the position to be I. So when I run the script, all it's going to do is again sort this based on its name, and it's going to reorder the worksheet, as you can see. So this is an example of how you can use collections. You can simply fetch as a plain array. You can read properties off of collection using just plain regular array functions such as map or for each. And then you can also call methods on the objects by simply invoking it within the array. So this makes the collection navigation of collection or dealing with object collections a much more straightforward and simpler process. The last thing I'll show is that in addition to making it easy, we're also working on making it more performant optimal. And so this is a work in progress. But what we have done is in cases where we are doing multiple writes, so now we can perform that in a single operation and reduce the chattiness. So here's an example of a script that sets just random colors on each of the cells. So if I run this, it's going to just set each of the cells with a random color. So maybe I invoked the wrong script. All right, so this is the one I wanted to showcase. So as you can see, it's doing a cell level operation. It's performing cell level, but you'll see that it completed pretty fast. So regardless of how big a range I select, so let's say I select a much bigger range here. So this is going to run and complete all in a single operation. So this is part of our journey to make the API surface performant by optimizing as much as we can when you run the script. There are certain best practices that we have documented in our documentation site. So you can go and see, beginning with the overview. There are samples that are included. There are a couple of detailed scenarios that you can walk through. That'll go into a lot more details. And as part of this, we also have some of the things to do's and don'ts of making your code more performant. So that is just a brief introduction into what the API surface looks like and some of its core capabilities, and the fact that we will continue to iterate over it and improve it. And because this is in the preview stage, so we are very curious to hear from you and what you think of the model. So you can actually go try this out today, and you can use Excel for web and show that your admin has enabled Office scripts. You can go to the Automate tab. You can try recording actions, editing, and running. You can check out sample scripts that I'm going to show you. So as part of the Office scripts experience itself, within the code editor, we have inbuilt samples. And we will continue to add more samples to it, but here are a couple that you can also get started with in addition to what we have in our documentation. And then if you search Office scripts, you'll find the site also available at AKMS Office scripts. So if you have any feedback or suggestions for the new Office Scripts feature, please let us know via either user voice, or you can head to Stack Overflow and use the Office Scripts tag to ask any technical questions that you may have. If you run into any problems, you can ask questions there as well. We also have the within Excel itself, there is the Help Improve Office link. And if you click and tell us what you feel, or if you have any feedback or running into an issue, we'll also get to hear that as well. So we really looking forward to hearing your feedback. So because we are in public preview phase, so we want to get as much feedback and usage as possible, and make sure that we make any revisions or enhancements that is needed while we're in the public preview. So the last thing I want to mention is talk about some of the questions that you may have in your mind, which is sort of, hey, what is the relation of the API model that I showcased with respect to Office.js, which is the primary API surface that drives our Office add-ins. So what I want to say is that Office.js and Office Scripts have a lot of things in common. So they share essentially the same object hierarchy, naming conventions, and error scenarios and error conditions. They're all basically the same. So Office.js drives the Office Scripts behind the scene. So if you're familiar with Office.js, that familiarity and knowledge, you can use that to learn Office Scripts pretty quickly, because you'll be familiar with the whole structure. If you're used to using add-in development, transitioning to Office Scripts is going to be a fairly simple process. There are key differences, as I described earlier, and we made those enhancements to really help with learning and development of Office Scripts users. And any new APIs related to Excel will surface in both the models. And Office.js, which is an asynchronous model, which gives kind of much more finer level control over your logic, will continue to drive the add-in development. A common question that we've heard in the past when we showcase this is, will this be available on the add-ins for add-in development? So right now we are focused on improving the scripting experience for Office Scripts users. So there is no plan for taking the simplified Office Scripts API for Office add-ins. We would love to hear your feedback on what you think this strategy might be like. Or if you have any kind of strong inclination of one versus the other, let us know as part of your feedback, and we are curious to hear from you. And once again, so the way to reach us would be through user voice. You can ask questions on Stack Overflow, and we do go over all the feedback that you send right from Excel Online using the Help Improve Office link. So that, I think, concludes the topics that I wanted to cover. And I'll be available for the rest of the presentation to address any other questions that you may have. And if you have any time at the end, we can kind of go into the Q&A mode as well. But continue to ask your questions here, and I'll also address offline.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Sudhi. Actually, there are a couple questions that came up that might as well ask now if you're willing. So there are a few questions around the relations between Office Scripts and Office add-ins. Specifically, could you call one from the other? And I know that's not yet available, but what is the timeline looking like for that? Or the
you mean calling the scripts from an add-in?
Yeah, or vice versa, calling an add-in function from a script.
Right. Yeah, so it is something that has come up in the past as well. So it is in our backlog, or it is something we are interested in, but we don't have a timeline for it yet. So we are working on a set of features right now that are in public preview. We are iterating it, and we are improving the quality. And so it is going to be definitely beyond our kind of initial GA period.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think for everyone who is interested in this sort of feature, not only requesting it through user voice in the channel Sudhi shared, but also sharing your scenario and the context for why you're looking to do that really helps us. Because in a lot of cases, there might be something similar you could do instead, that we could help you build out that work instead of creating a whole new feature. So yeah, share your needs and your apps with us, and we'd love to help you design them. So yeah, I think that's it. There were also some questions around like external calls and using REST APIs. And Sudhi, I don't know if you know the current status of that with Office scripts.
So the Office scripts right now, we don't yet support the REST API calls. So it is something that's on our backlog. We are working through how the permission model might fit in, and what sort of controls that the admins might want to have over the scripts that is accessing external data. So the things kind of that we are interested in is, hey, what does the API call to properties such as Microsoft Graph would look like, and how we can provide it in an integrated fashion, what the authorization model would look like, and how the permission model would work. So we still have some work to do there, both in terms of design as well as actual engineering work. So as of now, we don't support access to things like Graph. But it is something we are actively looking into.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sudhi. Appreciate your time. And yeah, Sudhi will be hanging out in the chat if anyone else has any questions. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. So next up, I'm going to share my screen again. And to kind of close out the call, Michelle is going to talk about a survey that we're doing to help with our documentation. So Michelle, are you on the call?
Yes, I am here.
All right, take it away.
All right. Yeah, I don't have too much to say here, but as I'm on the docs team, as Alex may have mentioned, and we're trying to uncover what tools and languages and other, what kind of frameworks you might be using. We're looking at our samples and snippets that we provide, and we're just trying to figure out what might be the best languages and frameworks and tools that we can support for you to make our docs even better. So it's a 5-question survey. It shouldn't take very long. Just go ahead and go to aka.ms/OA dev survey, and you should be able to fill it out there. It's just a simple form of 5 questions.
These sort of surveys really do help us with our documentation and tailor it to your needs. I know like the tech world is constantly evolving and growing, so it helps us get a pulse on where our developers are and what sort of stuff you're using, whether it's JavaScript versus TypeScript or jQuery versus React versus Angular, all that stuff. It helps us know where you're at and so much more. Yeah. Anything else, Michelle?
No, that is it. But I think you summed it up perfectly there.
Cool. Thank you. Flattery. All right. So that is kind of it for the heart of the call. So yeah, please take the time to fill out that survey. We'll repaste the link in the chat so it's clickable. We'll go into the Q&A. We've had a lot of some great questions in the chat, and we'll go over them more throughout. We always post all the questions and answers in the follow-up blog post to this call on the developer blog. So we'll put a link to that as well. These questions came in through our web form, and a lot of them were around the Chromium version of Edge, the new runtime, WebView 2 that we had Sudhir talk about at the top of the call. Like we said, we are planning to GA the new runtime later this year, but a lot of that depends on your usage and adoption. We also had questions around new PowerPoint APIs, and we are actively working on a new PowerPoint API set, but we don't have a release date. So again, head over to User Voice, request features, upvote what's there, and share your scenarios with us of what you need to do. And we can make this API set tailored towards your immediate needs. And then, yeah, we had some questions about the new on-send feature, just some details about it, like can you disable mail editing mode without displaying a dialog? And today you can't, but if that is a feature you need, again, request it. If you would like to engage with us, if you'd like to present on an upcoming call or give us feedback on the call or documentation, the platform, anything like that, please head over to aka.ms Office Add-ins Engage. And give us your contact information, your feedback, and if you want to share with us, if you're working on an add-in and want to share the details of it, your implementation, your cool new features, let us know, and we'd be happy to have you on the call. And if you are new to Office add-ins, there were some people in the chat who, this is their first introduction to it. Please head over to our docs at ACMS Office Add-ins docs. There we have some quick starts that'll get you up and running with an Office add-in in 5 minutes or less. You can also use the add-in script lab to explore these APIs and how they work with the host. So you can open up Excel and have a little mini add-in that edits the workbook. You can also start using Office scripts that is in public preview today. And I believe the new API improvements that Sudhi were talking about are 100% rolled out to everyone or coming soon. So head over to ACMS Office Scripts docs and take the tutorials there to start recording and using scripts today. We'll post some of these links in the chat, or we'll post the slides after this as well. If you're looking to learn, we have Script Lab, the documentation. We also have the developer program, so you can get an Microsoft 365 tenant and start testing out on a build of Office, your add-ins, your development needs. Start using Power Automate with Office scripts. And please engage with us on Stack Overflow and GitHub, User Voice, all that stuff. We're looking there. We're happy to answer all your questions. And then we also have other M365 developer community calls across the board. So for Teams, Graph, SharePoint, all that. Again, these links will be shared in the blog, but head over to the other calls this month for whatever your developer interests are. And with that, we'll end the call. So thank you so much for joining us. Our next call is August 12th at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Join us next month. Submit your questions ahead of time. We'll get them answered for the call. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.